All right, we're going to talk about a few different things today. First, we're going to talk about theory of privacy. So privacy is not a simple concept that can be easily defined. In addition, theories of privacy often confuse the concept of privacy with normative justification for a right to privacy. Perhaps the most basic and suggestive definition is implied in a seminal Harvard Law Review article written by Samuel Warren and Louis Brandeis in 1890. These authors differentiated the right to privacy from other legal rights and conceived privacy in terms of being let alone. How would you define privacy with respect to online privacy? How would you? So Ruth Gavison has advocated a version of the so-called seclusion theory, which defines privacy as the limitation of others' access to an individual with three key elements: secrecy, anonymity, and solitude. Gavison's theory suggests that privacy is best understood as a condition of restricted access. Privacy is lost when somebody observes a person or otherwise intrudes upon her in a private space where there is an expectation of being left alone. So privacy, having these three elements of secrecy, anonymity, and solitude, reflect this expectation of being left alone, this expectation of here is a space that one is not expected to be observing the other person. This is content that should not be observed except by one individual or individuals within a sphere, a particular context. Thanks to the rise of such technology, however, more recent privacy theories have focused greater attention on information privacy, which concerns the protection of personal information. So not just privacy in terms of things that are very private, like your relationships or whatever, but information like your credit card information, right? Or any other information that you just don't want other people to see, whether it's because they might steal your identity or whether it's just something personal that you don't want people to know about. By comparison, the control theory, which is advocated by philosophers like Charles Fry, suggests that privacy is contingent on possessing control over information about oneself. Even the U.S. Supreme Court has opined that personal privacy can be defined as a condition of control over information concerning his or her person. So in this respect, when we're talking about control or the control theory, when somebody has information about a particular person and that information is expected to be kept private, they have control over that person, right? So one reason why we may not want to give out this content, this private information, is because we don't want control over them. So we have an obligation, right? We have an obligation to others to make sure that we don't give out information and we keep that kind of content private, right? So that is the theory of privacy. That's what we mean when we talk about privacy. Now, how does this relate to the digital infrastructure? So we know that we're supposed to keep search content private, but how is this reflected in our digital infrastructure? Right? So we have vulnerabilities. So we want to make sure that some content is private so that all people in general, the public, isn't going to access it. So we have we look at the vulnerabilities of network technologies, right? We see that there are vulnerabilities. One example of this is the attack on Sony Pictures Entertainment, which could have been a plot for one of its movies. A hacker group known as Guardians of Peace breached Sony's poorly protected computer system. The hackers leaked internal Sony documents along with the social security numbers of 47,000 current and former employees. They also posted controversial and embarrassing emails among Sony executives. The hackers even distributed pirated copies of several upcoming movies. What was the reason for this damaging intrusion? The group was protesting the release of The Interview, a satirical film that mocked North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. So we want to keep certain things private, but the problem is that you have hackers and you have systems that might be vulnerable. The Sony attack has not been the only high-profile data breach where corporate networks have been penetrated. Major breaches have occurred at Target, Home Depot, Uber, Equifax, Facebook, and Marriott International. The Marriott breach for its Starwood properties, one of the largest in history, exposed the personal data of up to 500 million guests and the consumer data stolen or compromised included passport numbers, travel information, details, and credit card numbers. Passport information could of considerable value for spy agencies who wish to compile dossiers on executives, right? So what are some ways in which you would try to stop these sorts of attacks from bad players, right? So we already know that there is an obligation. We have an obligation to keep people safe, to keep their private information safe so that bad players don't have access to them. And just people that shouldn't have access to them at all, right? So what are some ways in which you would try to stop these sorts of vicious attacks from bad players in other countries? So there's a variety of ways. There, we have the laws, and we have certain legalities where it's just illegal to access this sort of thing, and we also have software that we can use to prevent such information from being exposed. So let's go on to here. Cybersecurity as a moral obligation. So again, when we're talking about cybersecurity, we have a moral obligation to protect people that we're working with. There are, of course, many reasons why companies should be motivated to implement state-of-the-art security technologies to ensure information integrity and system reliability. There are certainly market pressures at work that encourage corporations to fix and secure computer networks. Customers will punish vendors who have a cavalier attitude about their personal data or who fail to practice common sense digital hygiene. So obviously there is one aspect of this where if you simply do not practice these safe, if you don't demonstrate these safe practices and you don't make sure that your customers are secure, people aren't going to come to you. People are not going to do business with you if they feel that their private information will be compromised. Sound security mechanisms, on the other hand, will bolster consumer confidence that a corporation's online domain is a safe place to do business. So on the one hand, one reason why we do it is it's simply good business practice. If you don't, you're going to lose business. People are not going to come to you. More importantly, though, there is a moral imperative, right? And this is to ensure that the level of cybersecurity is adequate. When customers make purchases online with their credit cards, engage in searches, or share information on a Facebook page, they are placing their trust in the hands of these digital and social media companies which collect and store all of this data. If those organizations are careless or lack proper security consciousness, the end result could be calamitous for their customers who might easily become victims of credit card fraud, identity theft, or other forms of mischief once their personal data are exposed and misappropriated. Hence, there is a moral duty to take reasonable precautions and to implement feasible security measures that will provide for the security and the integrity of online transactions. So not only is it a good business practice, you have a moral obligation, right? And obligations, as we've talked about with deontology, is the fact that with another person, when you're in a community, when you are connected with another person in one way or another, you have an obligation to treat them as an end in and of themselves, just as you would want to be treated. And since you would want to have your privacy protected, likewise, you have a responsibility to protect the privacy of people that you are their customer, that you're working on their computers, you're maybe working for these companies and providing the cybersecurity for these systems. So what is a moral duty and why should we have one, right? So obviously a moral duty is an expectation that we need to be responsible to treat a person as an end in and of themselves. We're obligated because it reduces harm. Is that one reason? Yeah, we do reduce harm, but there is something much deeper than just reducing harm. You have an obligation to the other individual, the other conscious agent, to treat them as you would want to be treated. What powers do responsible agents exercise over their actions? One partial answer is that the relevant power is a form of control, and in particular a form of control such that the agent could have done otherwise than to perform the action in question. This captures one standard notion of free will, and one of the central issues in debates about free will has been about whether possession of it, free will, the ability to do otherwise, is compatible with causal determinism or divine foreknowledge. So whether you're determined, you're forced to just by nature, by your biology, by your surroundings, by your by your nature, or I'm sorry, nurture, what your environment, or whether you simply choose. The point is that we are held responsible for treating people as ends in and of themselves. Whether we are adapting determinism, moral agency, or compatibilism, which is somewhere in between those two. Now that we understand that we have an obligation, and it's not just some frivolous or trivial obligation, it's a real, tangible obligation to other people to treat them as ends in and of themselves. And it's just something that we must do. It's a moral imperative. How do we do it? What are some ways in which we can protect people that we are working on systems for, and that they're trusting their sensitive data for? So one example is encryption to dispute. So the terrorist attacks on September 11, 2001 were a pivotal moment in modern history. In the aftermath, national security became a central focus, right? So here is a situation where there was private information that was leaked, and terrorists found out when these flights were going out. They were able to take advantage of a lot of national security information that they were able to circumvent. And intelligence agencies and law enforcement began to prioritize counterterrorism after discovering these plots and seeking justice on these terrorists. As terrorists became more technologically advanced or sophisticated, they started using encrypted platforms for communication. So when the terrorists were talking with each other, they were using encryption. And that's one way you can prevent a lot of this content from being seen by everyone. You can encrypt it. But the other side is terrorists can use the encryption too. You have the San Bernardino attack. After the attack, the FBI sought access to iPhone users by one of the shooters. So we had a shooting in San Bernardino back in 2015. And after the attack, the FBI was trying to look at the iPhone that was used by one of the shooters. Apple refused. And they refused to create a backdoor citing risks to global privacy and security. So on the one hand, you have the public security, right? You have public security, the public safety interests. And then on the other hand, you have privacy. Because if the NSA or the CIA or FBI is able to get this information, they're able to have private personal information that they got through an iPhone, through an invasion of people's privacy. So, right to privacy. Individuals possess more rights to control their personal information. And that includes even in the face of law enforcement. Encryption protects this right. Creating backdoors could violate that right, even if done for good reasons. We have a duty of government to protect citizens, though. On the other hand, we need to have social safety concerns. If encryption prevents law enforcement from stopping terrorism, that duty may be compromised. So we have the universal rule problem. If we accept that governments can weaken encryption, could this principle be universalized? Would we accept all governments, including authoritarian regimes, having this power? Likely, deontological conclusion. Many deontologists argue privacy is a fundamental right, and creating backdoors violates that right, even if it helps security. However, some argue that rights can conflict, meaning security and privacy must be balanced through lawful warrants. So that's the question for you guys. Is it worth it, right? Is it worth it to surrender some of your own personal rights for the sake of national security? Or do you think that national security is no excuse for violating many of these privacy principles that you hold so dear? So I want you guys to think about that. I want you to think about what privacy means, how important privacy is, and when there are times to sacrifice privacy for the sake of national security, if there is ever a time. And I'll see you guys next week.